how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're gonna get.
For this episode, I sit down and chat with Al Blackstone, and we cover everything from his intro into dance, choreography, directing his most recent project, Freddie Falls in Love, some of his upcoming projects, and everything in between. Al really opens up with his lessons learned and his reasons and ways of being, which I think is so beneficial to anyone listening because it's a real deep dive into his creations and the thoughts and the feelings behind those creations. So I hope you enjoy this episode and keep on keeping on. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me is Al Blackstone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm so good. I'm really excited to be here.
It's so great to have you on the show. I've heard such wonderful things. Taylor, we've talked.
Yes.
I mean, she and people hear this in the previous week's episode with Stephanie Clemens.
Mm-hmm.
She is a connector of humans, and you enjoy connecting people, is what I've gathered from my research.
Yes, it feels a bit like it's become my purpose, but also just the thing that I like to do, a thing that I like to do a lot.
Yeah. Has that been more of a recent discovery, or has that been going on since youth?
I think
You are
it's
still
been.
youthful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's been definitely the last 5 years of my life has really come to the forefront of realizing that I love what I do with dance and theater, but ultimately the thing that sort of is underneath it, pushing it forward always, is this love of bringing people together. It's similar to teaching. I love teaching, and I like making up dance moves and teaching them to people and helping them do them well. But ultimately, the group of people coming into a room and being in my care is the thing that I wake up in the morning excited most about.
I love that. And that's partly, we were talking before we started, partly why I started this, is to bring people together. It's an incredible thing when you can serve other people and get enough for other people of what they want. You'll get what you want in turn.
Yes.
It's a cyclical.
And I think so many people come to this city in particular, or really any city, because they want to be around lots of different kinds of people. And so it feels like a wonderful thing to embrace when you realize that you can do that and you can help other people do that.
Yeah. And you didn't grow up too far from the city. It was New Jersey for you?
I was very spoiled, yeah. Both my parents were New Yorkers. So my mom was from Jersey City and my dad was from the Bronx. So we came in a lot. So I was very spoiled in my childhood to be in New York quite a bit.
And you grew up in a dance studio, so to speak, metaphorically.
No, literally.
Overnight.
It was in my house. No, I did.
It was literally
It was.
in the house.
Yeah, it was in my house. I did. My parents, they still teach. They had a dance studio. They owned and operated it for 45 years.
Wow.
At the Jersey Shore.
And you've been taking classes since you could remember?
Always.
That was like you learned to walk in that room?
Yeah, I literally, I would go play in the dance studio. Sometimes that involved dancing and sometimes it didn't, but I mean, it's all I've ever known, really.
Was that ever thrust upon you, or that's kind of just like, were you sitting there, your mother was teaching, and how was your dad associated with it? What was that?
My dad was also a teacher. They both danced and they started the business together. Well, my mom started it first and then brought my dad in as a teacher, like a master teacher from New York. And then they started dating. But they never thrust it upon me. No, I mean, I was surrounded by it, completely immersed in it, but there was never pressure to do it well or be good at it or make it my life's work. It all just, if anything, I think my parents were very aware of not favoring my sister and I. I have a sister who's 6 years older than me. Yeah. And so we both sort of decided on our own at some point to love dance and to do it well. I can't speak for her, but that was my journey for sure.
What did you learn from your sister about work ethic?
My sister was the sort of sibling. She was my hero for sure. I admired her intelligence and her independence and her incredible work ethic. So she was this sort of person who was, top of her class. She got a scholarship to study at Alvin Ailey in high school. And so she would leave our high school in New Jersey early every day and get on a bus to New York an hour and a half and do her homework on the bus and then study at Alvin Ailey at night and then get on a bus and come back to New Jersey every day. And she was an incredible dancer and then graduated 4th in her class. So she was just sort of the epitome of like, you can be good at more than one thing and you can be really good at more than one thing. And if you want to do something and do it well, it's possible.
That's incredible.
Yes, it was a lot to live up to, as you can imagine.
Yeah, a lot to live up to. So we'll continuing that on that vein. What are there some standout lessons from that studio? You know, growing up in that dance studio, things that maybe you'd hear your mother, father, or sister.
I think, and as I'm getting older, still young but older, I've realized that I grew up with this sort of network of people surrounding us at all times. There was always a large group of people that were connected to the studio, the students, the parents, that I always felt like there were just always people there. And my parents had this like group of people that I knew would know who I was and would be nice to me and would, you know, I don't know, there was just like familiarity and comfort in being around large groups of people. And I think I realize when I look at what I'm doing now that in some ways I've recreated that for myself, that there's this large network of people, specifically in New York City, but and beyond, who are brought together by dance and who like dance and who care about it. And it feels great to feel like you're in a group of people that like the same thing. So I think I learned the power of community and the power of network and the power of also, I think, celebrating, you know, at the end of the year, the recital, this feeling of like everyone coming together and the sense of occasion and celebrating what had happened in the year and performing. And it just was in my blood forever. And you know, I loved the feeling of everyone coming together to share this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that answer. Well, I mean, again, it ties into how we started this conversation about community. It's a real sense of community, and especially when you can find the people that share like-minded sensibilities, it makes working on any, you know, common goal, common theme just easier.
Yes.
More enjoyable.
Yes.
Was there a time when you decided? Well, of course there was a time when you decided to pursue this as work, as a life path, career.
In high school, I remember going into high school feeling like I was going to quit dance. I think partly because I was afraid of what people in high school were going to say about the fact that I was a male dancer. But then somewhere along the way, in my freshman year of high school, I fell madly in love really with dance for the first time. I went away to a dance camp that summer and came back and was changed. I think it was the first time I was away from my studio and away from everyone I knew and sort of had to just be myself. And the first time you leave home, you realize like you have an opportunity to sort of define who you are for the first time, you know, and because there's no preconceived notion of who you are. There's no history. And somewhere along the way that summer, I just desperately fell in love with dance and decided I wanted to do it. And I wanted to perform and be a dancer, but I also started choreographing around that time for my parents and for my parents' students, and they were very willing to let me experiment, which was amazing. So I started from a young age doing that, and they always, performing and choreography I always did both. They were always both exciting to me, and teaching as well. I loved teaching. Obviously my parents were very generous and let me do it, but also it was free labor for them. So, you know, they didn't have to pay me. And I ended up being pretty good at it. So I got to teach all through high school, which was really amazing. And so it just sort of gradually happened as I got older, and I continued to do both. Yeah.
Well, in regards to teaching, how did you get better at communicating or seeing, teaching? How did you become a better teacher?
I mean, I think I'm hopefully always becoming a better teacher. At that time, I was surrounded by dance teachers when I think about it. My parents were dance teachers. My sister was a dance teacher. You know, there were 15 to 20 other teachers that taught at their school. And then we would go into New York and take classes from people like Frank Hatchett and Sheila Barker and Jermaine Salzberg, all of these New York dance teachers. So I just had these incredible role models around me all the time. So when it came time for me to do it myself, I think it just felt very, very natural. And no one ever really coached me on it. No one's ever, not even my parents really ever said like, you really should do this, you really should do that. I just learned by doing it. And but I think I had a great head start because it was what I've known my whole life. I think it's anyone that has a family business, you grow up in it, you see it, and you learn by watching and being observed and observing.
Yeah. Was there a connection to choreographing and directing in your mind, or was that kind of like hand in hand?
No, I don't think I ever even really knew what directing was. I don't think that that was ever a thing on my radar. My childhood and early, and late teens and early 20s were really all about dance. It never crossed my mind that I could ever be a director. So when that sort of started to come into the picture, I was both surprised, but also realized that it had been in some ways what I had already been doing for a while.
Yeah. Okay. So then you studied dance at college, and you get to the city again.
Yeah.
Is there ever a moment of self-doubt for you in terms of auditioning, going through the beginning, establishing yourself, creating a network?
Every day, every single day. I mean, yes, all the time. I still, before every project, before every rehearsal, I still feel nauseous. Every time.
It's visceral.
And even teaching, I'm so comfortable walking into a room and teaching. I do it so much. I've done it so much. And I still think, like, do I really have something to say? And is this, how is this going to go? But you get used to it. I think it's a relationship with your own, that voice inside your head that says, like, you can't do this. And it's about learning how to talk to that voice and dealing with it. But in some ways, I think auditioning is a different beast, obviously. And I don't know, I think I was always so grateful to learn dance steps in an audition situation because I felt like I was the most comfortable doing that. When it got to singing or reading sides, obviously I had a way less experience doing that, and I didn't go to theater school, and I did take voice lessons, but I was much less comfortable. And it wasn't until I studied with a teacher named Jen Waldman here in New York where I learned that I just learned the idea that singing and acting can be playful and should feel playful, is an expression of you as a person, and that your individual voice is the thing that's most precious to us, and is the thing that if you don't embrace it, regardless of whether you can hit the note or not, then the experience is going to be missing something. And I learned to enjoy singing and acting in a way that I hadn't before, and connect it to how I feel when I'm dancing, which is like I'm expressing myself.
Was there a direct correlation between the day or when you became more comfortable with singing and acting into booking jobs, almost like an energy, or was it never? It's all, as Jeff says, it's all sideways.
What a good question. Yeah. When that is, and yes, it is all sideways. I have to agree with that. Yes, 100%.
Okay.
100%. Because I think I felt like, this isn't so different. And, there was a time where I was working on my singing, but I would go in the room and I would just be so terrified that I couldn't reproduce what I did in my voice lessons with my teacher, where I felt comfortable and I was staring at the wall and, just feeling so natural. And so, yes, as soon as I felt like I could be myself and have the confidence to not be perfect, and yet still be authentically present, things did start to happen for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to discuss this a little bit more, because the mind can play real tricks with you. You can really, just changing the way you think can change an entire event or moment in time. So I think it's it's interesting to find out what clicks and what switches for someone to relax and lean into.
I think I've also
anything.
I think I've also found this for myself, even though I don't audition anymore. It's like I'm very comfortable teaching, right? And so you build a class and you build a community in New York, and I'm teaching classes, and I feel like I've learned how to do that. But it's been very important for me to then go and do other kinds of projects where I walk in the room and I'm not comfortable, and it's new, and it's something that's not comfortable. And so I've tried to continually put myself in positions where I don't feel like I naturally just know exactly what to do, and it comes so easily, which then has, kept me engaged and stimulated and growing, which is ideally what you want. And so the feeling that I had of like, I don't really know how to sing, can I really do this? even though I don't audition anymore, I still feel like I get to have those moments because like the first time I directed a musical, it's like, I don't really know how to do this. Am I going to know what I'm doing? And then you do it.
Yeah. Well, I imagine also sitting behind the table now and watching people audition.
Yeah.
It's a whole different, I mean, it's like a soft focus. You see everything that works.
Yeah.
Everything that doesn't. And I'm curious, are there things that you see that are magnetic? Energies, ways of being, behaviors that, I don't know, pull your eye, or things that you think work?
Well,
or just things that you've seen?
I think it's particularly on your show, people have done such a great job about talking about when someone moves you, or when someone, right, that's the thing that you're looking for. I also am lucky, and it's an interesting position to be in, that a lot of the people that come in to audition, I know from class. They're students of mine, but now they're singing in front of me, right? And that is a new thing. And the thing that always is most impressive for me is when people are prepared. I really appreciate and respect when I feel like a dancer comes in, regardless of whether they have a lot of singing experience or an amazing singer, but when I feel like they've really taken this part of the audition seriously. Because I know that they've been studying dance, and I know that they take that part very seriously, but there are a lot of dancers that just hope to sort of like slide through the singing or get through it. I sometimes am disappointed, because the reality is that that doesn't really happen. And there are so many dancers that I adore that I just haven't been able to hire for a musical because they haven't prepared, they haven't put the time into nailing that,
Piece.
That piece. And I think nailing it's the wrong word. Just taking it really seriously and not hoping that I can't wait to get through this and get it over with, and hopefully I dance well enough that Al will still put me in the show.
Right.
But the reality is that I don't always have that power, nor do I want, if I'm doing a musical, I mean, people have to be able to sing it. That's the reality of the thing that you're auditioning for. So I get really excited when a dancer comes in, regardless of how well they do, and I feel like they've picked the song, they've worked on the song, they're coming in, they mean business, and they're there to say, like, I really want to do this, and I'm willing to do this.
Yeah, and you can feel that.
You can.
And that's the other interesting part, too, is that it's not always just you. It's so collaborative. I mean, it's collaborative of, like, director, choreographer, and then actors, but then who you are collaborating with.
Yes.
There's a lot of say.
Yes.
In a project.
Yes, and a music director.
Project.
I mean, music director is, usually the person that I work closest with on a project, particularly if I'm choreographing it. And their opinion is just so precious and important, and I want them to feel supported. I want them to, feel like they have what they need as much as I do.
Yeah. For you, so, I mean, returning back a little bit to when you were auditioning, is there a story or a time or a series of auditions that you went through that, first, I want to just have like a story that you share in regards to it, but also things that you were learning along the way the team was communicating with you, anything that stands out.
Well, I think the best audition story that I have is my experience with Wicked, which I eventually did the national tour and made my Broadway debut doing it. But I auditioned for it, I think, 7 times over 3 or 4 years. And I think the lesson was persistence, that I continued to go. And, I really believe that if I hadn't gone that 7th time, I wouldn't have gotten that job. And so I think that is, I know a lot of people who've gone in for that show once or twice, and, they don't like me, but, and don't go back.
Yeah.
So that's the best audition story that I think I have. Yeah.
Okay. No, but and again, another good point, persistence. I mean, that's really the only factor when you get to a certain level that, because everyone's talented.
Yeah, so many talented people in this city, in this world. Yes,
it's great. It's incredible. Okay, so changing gears a little bit, I'm curious. How did So You Think You Can Dance come about for you? What was that? How did that come up?
So I had a student from New Jersey named Jess Loprato, who's Broadway's Jess Loprato. He's been in a bunch of shows, and he's just an incredible talent. But when I met him, he was a kid in a dance studio in New Jersey, and I used to choreograph his solos. And he got on the show, and on the show you need solos for your, they used to do like Dance for Your Life or something, where all the contestants had to do solos. They still do solos, and I choreographed all of his solos. So I think that was the first time that the producers found out who I was, because they really liked his solos. They were funny, they were comedic, and they were theatrical. And then I had the opportunity to present to the producers, and I did, and it went well, but they didn't hire me. And it was, I actually ended up, the show happens in other countries as well. It's different producers, but it's affiliated. They sent me to Vietnam to choreograph on So You Think You Could Dance Vietnam. So I did that. Went to Vietnam for 2 weeks and choreographed 4 pieces for dancers who didn't speak English. I had a translator in another country, which was incredible. That was an incredible experience. And that was great. And then I came back, and about a year later, I had a meeting with Jeff Thacker, who was the producer of the show. And somehow, eventually, they just took a chance on me and let me try it. And it went well. And I think this is now my 6th season. But it was a bunch of connections and conversations, and I had known Mandy Moore, who was a friend, and I know that she had talked to them, and Sonia Taya was a friend who I know sort of had talked to Jeff, and it just over time and years happened. But the sort of circling back to Vietnam, that experience was so difficult and so challenging that I found that when I got to the US version, I was very well prepared.
Yeah, well, what did you learn about communicating with those dancers
Oh my
in
God.
Vietnam?
Oh
Or
man.
what didn't you learn?
Yeah, I mean, it's thank goodness dance is a universal language, so we were able to create something, and that was very special, but it was very challenging to direct and talk about emotions when my work is so driven by emotion that when you can't directly explain what you want, it can be frustrating. But ultimately, it turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences I've had, and a reminder of how dance really can bring people together, and it doesn't matter if you speak the language or not.
That's so true. Was there any thought in your mind when creating these pieces for a camera versus or was it for the audience and it's just being picked up by the camera? Is there any thought of that? Or
at that point, no, because it was all so new to me, and I'd never choreographed anything really for camera. So at that point, no, you're just in a room with a couple of kids making a dance, and you just sort of trust that the director is going to take care of your work. And now it's different. Now when I'm making a piece for the show, I think about what the camera's doing, and I think about how it can be enhanced through the angles of where the camera goes. But at that point, no, I was just trying to get through it.
Are there standout moments with any of these top performers that you've worked with? Their ways of being, their ways of communicating, or a story in particular?
Specifically on So You Think You Could Dance, or just in general?
Well, yeah, for now, and then I'd be interested in the other ones too.
I think the thing that's interesting about that show and that experience for me is that it always boils down to a couple kids in a dance studio, and it always ends up feeling very much like when I was choreographing at my mom's dance studio. It's a few people in a room making up a dance, and by the time it gets on stage and there's cameras and all of that, it turns into something else. But when you're making it, it always feels so intimate. And maybe part of my tactic is to make it feel that way so that it feels organic and natural. But, the best performers, my favorite people to work with, and people like Melanie Moore, who's, just one of the greatest performers of our time, in my opinion, is that it's playful. It's playful, and we're not afraid to have bad ideas, and we try weird things, and we laugh. And I think if you're in the zone, it's a conversation, and it feels organic, and it should feel fun and joyful. And my favorite moments have been, just feeling safe and enjoying my time in a room with people.
Yeah. Are there, and then out of So You Think You Can Dance, are there other tidbits or stories or points you want to touch on in regards to everything?
People's process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know everyone has a different process, so it's interesting to, I don't know.
I think, my experience is that some of the greatest performers and the biggest, the people that I would be the most afraid to work with, or have been just the easiest, most comfortable, and have in some ways made me feel comfortable so that I could feel like I could do my best. And I think that is something that you hope for in someone that you're working with. It doesn't always happen that way. But I think if you can feel comfortable, even the conversation that we're having right now, I think you're doing your best to make me feel comfortable, and I'm doing my best to make you feel comfortable so that we can express ourselves freely and openly.
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of the greats do that and know how to do that.
They care about that.
Yeah. And they care about the conversation. It's not just one-sided. Like, well, what am I doing? What are we doing? How can we, what do you need?
Going along with that, what are your views on relationships in this industry, or thoughts that come to mind?
Relationships in this industry, I think, I think one of my biggest things that I've learned is to listen. And the people that I'm drawn to work with are people that listen really well. And you can feel when someone's listening to you in a room. It could be 500 people in a room, and I can feel who's with me and who's really there. And as an assistant listening, and as a performer listening, for myself as well. And even still listening to the people that I'm working with, listening to what they need, listening to music, really listening to it, connecting to it. And so as far as relationships go, I think there's a lot of emphasis put right now on what we're putting out, but I don't know that there's enough emphasis on what you're receiving. So, there's definitely people that come to my class because they want to show me something. They want to show me their moves. They want to prove something to themselves, to me. Those are the people that usually don't come back. People will come and they're trying to put on a show, and it's just not really the space for it, because it's not about that. It's about being there together.
I mean, I know it's difficult for us to think what someone else is thinking, but do you think that's they're hoping that there's a conversation at the end of class? Do you think there's like oh my God, you were so...
Oh, yeah. People
my
really
life,
want
I
that
thought
conversation
it was this,
after class.
But now it's this.
Yeah, people really want that conversation after class. And it's hard because I find myself in a position where I can feel people wanting me to validate what they're doing. But that's just not my intention in what I'm doing, in with what I'm trying to give. I'm not trying to validate anybody. I want to give you space, and I want to give you information, and I want to maybe inspire you or motivate you or have an experience with you. But it's not my job to tell you that you're good enough. And it never will be. And I can never do that for people. I can't. And even if I do, the sad thing is that people can say, you are amazing. You forget that 5 minutes later. The things you don't forget are the things that are criticisms, right? Those are the things that stay with us, sadly. I don't know why that is.
Forever.
Yeah, really, right? I mean, 100 people can come see my show and say they loved it, but the one person that's like, I don't really get this. Like, that's the thing that you just go to bed thinking about. But in any case, I can sense the people that need that from me. And it makes me sad, because I want them to know that they're enough and that they're good enough, and that, that it's about being present and being together and having something to say. But no one's ever going to, I'm never going to be able to, change someone's life by telling them that they're good enough. That's not useful. And I don't think that's what my role as a teacher is. So that's hard sometimes.
Yeah, that is. There's switching gears slightly.
Please.
Connecting people. And your feelings on that and your views on that. What comes to mind? What is the passion behind that? What is it to you?
I think going back to sort of how I grew up and feeling like there were groups of people that came together and got to know each other. It was interesting in a dance class, the people that weren't necessarily going to be friends in high school, but like in that, if they had just gone to school together, we never would have become friends. But because they share this thing of dance, they make these relationships, which unexpected friendships are, I think, part of what makes this world a better place, right? Finding common ground with someone that you normally wouldn't necessarily be able to connect with, and then being able to build a relationship on that. It's how we grow, so that we're not just constantly becoming friends with people that are just like us.
Mirrors.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously in a dance scenario, it's like everyone loves dance, so we have that in common. But we do have a lot of different backgrounds. And I don't know, I think even though people take dance class together, they don't often talk to each other. And so I try to encourage people to talk to one another both before class, during class, and after class, especially in an adult scenario. If it's in a professional class, you should be able to talk to the person next to you. It's not, it's okay. And I think it's so sad when you've been taking class next to somebody and you think they're so amazing and they inspire you, but you never say anything to them and you never get to know them. But I've just along the way found that it's important to me to make sure that the people in my class know each other, that if something was wrong, that you felt like there was someone you could talk to about it, and that in a city of, millions of people, that you could come somewhere and make it feel a little bit like home. That's become important to me. And I, I love going out, and I like going out dancing, and I at a certain point realized that I was always like finding people and like bringing them into my circle and introducing them and making them feel like part of the group. And somewhere along the way, I realized like, oh, this thing that I'm doing in my social life, I actually really like doing in my work, professional life as well. And that makes me feel good about what I'm doing because it feels bigger than just the dance moves.
Yeah. What has dance taught you about human communication?
I think that we all have energy that we can use, right? Like you walk into a room and you have a vibe and you have an energy. I think part of what we do in dance is manipulate that energy and express it or keep it in, or, we use our bodies to express, but it's also our energy. And I think it's taught me the power of presence and how your presence can affect a room that you're in. So if you're someone that walks into a room, what is your energy doing to that room? And it really is possible to have an effect on anywhere that you are if you use your breath and your energy and your spirit and your body to do so. So I've learned that all the time. And I think part of my goal when I start a class is I know how it feels when it begins and I know how I want it to feel at the end. Yeah. And a lot of the times we get there, a lot of the times, not always, but there's something about moving people and how you move them and how you show them and how you're able to express yourself that makes them feel comfortable. And ideally the room ends up feeling really, really good. So
I wish that could be talked about more because that happens. I mean, that happens in an audition room, that happens in a production meeting, that happens in a class, that happens, you can just feel it. In this conversation, we'll be able to be like, well, this was a crappy conversation, or this was a great conversation, and it feels great. And you can feel that, but it's not discussed. And I don't know that it can be taught. I think it can only be learned. Yeah. If that makes sense. Because you can't teach someone it. They have to almost just be available and open to, I have an energy. What is that energy? And how can I manipulate that energy based on what situation I'm in?
Yes, and adapt and choose to either, sort of follow the energy that's already set there, or do you want to do something to that energy? Do you want to change the room? Yeah. And I just try to, I try in my classes to bring people's attention to the fact that we can do that we have that power.
Yeah. Do you meditate?
I don't.
Is spiritual in that sense?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it's not like the conversation doesn't have to go there, but I was just curious, is there like a daily ritual or way you start your day, way you end your day, anything particular that?
No, I mean, it's, I like being alone, which I don't get to do very often. Yeah. But I mean, like, difficult. I love walking to the subway. I love being on the subway. I commune with music a lot. It's important for me to go dancing and express myself through personally without having any choreography and just being able to connect with music and my body. And that feels really important to me and a part of me as a person and an artist. And I love friends and family. I love community. But I don't meditate. I think it's beautiful. I haven't explored it yet. I know a lot of people that do. But yeah, I journal. I reflect a lot. And I think a lot about the past. Sometimes it's a problem, but I like to think about things that have happened and reflect on them and try to bring them to my work so that I can, maybe bring something to life that I learned along the way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's in directing, what have you learned about communicating with actors, or even those quick adjustments in a callback? What have you learned, when to push a point, when to let a point go, just communicating with different humans?
I think I put a lot of faith in other people that they have the answers. So I don't know. I'm not the kind of director that I know what works and what doesn't work, and I know what things feel like, and I can observe it, and I can be critical and, sort of push it into one direction or another. Excuse me. But as far as performers go, most of the time they have the answer. Well, how does it feel? Like, does it feel good doing it this way? Does it feel not good doing it that way? And I think in some ways, it's empowering actors to feel like they can take that kind of ownership over what they're doing. That's the thing that I've learned. And I think it came out of insecurity, right? Like, I don't know the answer. If you need an answer from me, though, at this point now in my career, I feel like I can finally say that I can give you an answer of what I think something is. But at the beginning, you just sort of lean on what people already know how to do. Yeah. But then I realized, I think somewhere along the way, that that's a really good way to get people to do work that they feel good about and feels right for them.
Because it's their choice.
But if they don't trust themselves and they don't have, and they can't use their imagination and they can't come up with something, then it's difficult for me to work with them.
Yeah.
I want it to feel like we are making it, not that I'm telling you how to do it.
It is collaborative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, and because you've worked now at a number of theaters, across the country, are there standout things you enjoy with certain ways the production aspect is handled, or just different artistic directors, way theaters are run, or things that stand out in your mind as particularly helpful?
I think the theaters that I've worked at that I feel the most proud to be a part of are theaters that understand that a person's entire experience is what we're doing. It's not only about the production, that an actor's experience from the very beginning of a process, from the first day, all the way through closing, is part of what makes the show special. And so I appreciate theaters, Music Theater Wichita comes to mind, and theaters like Maltz Jupiter, where I feel like they care so much about everyone's experience, not just the star, but everyone's experience, my assistant's experience, and the person that's cleaning the studio at night's experience, because we are all working on something together.
Parking attendants,
yes,
at Maltz Jupiter. I mean, it's like Andrew's got uniforms.
Yes.
I mean, it's a lot of it's a sense of unity.
Yes, everyone feels like they're part of something, and that is the ultimately, when you come away from a show, what you reflect and feel is what your experience was, not the audience's reaction to what you made, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a huge part of what we're trying to do. But if you feel really great about the people that you're working with, and you feel like you're all working together to make something, you're going to feel that on stage, and the audience is going to feel that too. So I appreciate organizations that come from that point of view.
Yeah. Cause, and it's funny, cause like the more longer you're in the business, the more shows you do. It's like that the audience is a constant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there will always be applause at the end of the show, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
But it's the everything that happens the second you take your costume off.
Yes. To
when you put it back on. So everything, which is way more time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, yeah. How did your relationship with Sonia Taya come about?
Sonia was choreographing a musical in 2011, I believe, or 12, called The Last Goodbye, which was directed by Alex Timbers, and she needed an associate choreographer who had experience in theater and storytelling, but also had some experience in contemporary dance, and I was recommended to her. And we had coffee, and we had a 30-minute coffee meeting, and I got the job. I had no idea what it was going to be like, what her needs were going to be. I was very scared and unsure of. I'd never really. I assisted a lot, but not on a new musical. And it turned out to be one of the the greatest relationships of my life. I learned so much from her. She's become a great friend and collaborator, and I believe so wholeheartedly in what she does, and she's been so incredibly supportive of me. So it was a very lucky connection to make.
What were are there standout lessons learned along the way?
She speaks about everything with such great passion, everything. She cares so deeply about what she's doing. And people respond to her passion and enthusiasm and commitment. I stole this from her, which is, she always uses the phrase embrace. Let's embrace how difficult this is. Let's embrace how hot it is in this room. Let's embrace, the fact that this might not be the right step, but let's just embrace it. And I love that image and that word, and let's just say yes to it and see where it takes us. I feel like that's one of the things that stuck out the most from me. Not to mention the fact that she is just so herself. She knows how she feels about things. She's not afraid to be emotional. She's not afraid to do things her own way, and she's not afraid to not know the answers. And I really appreciate that about her as an artist. I think she's been really in an industry, especially musical theater, where it's so easy to fit into boxes. I think that she's really done an incredible job of being herself, and people want to work with her because of who she is and how she feels, not because they want her to make a certain kind of show to their standards, right? They want her to do her thing, and I really respect that.
Yeah. I feel like I had another question in there in regards to her, but it's escaping me right now. If it comes back, we'll wrap back around to that. When you go about choreographing, creating a picture, is there a process or series of processes that you go through?
Usually start with one little thing, start with something. I usually say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's try this. You start with one thing, you add another thing.
Perfect.
And then I think my thing is I have gotten better at stepping away, looking at things as if it wasn't mine, right? So like, I think a lot of people watch things and they're really inside of it, and it's about, is this good, is this not? I think I've gotten pretty good at sort of taking myself out of something and not even necessarily connecting to it emotionally, and just sort of looking at it and objectively making adjustments based on just, where does my eye go? What does this look like? How does this work? And so it's that's I think how it begins. And then also, of course, just what if we, maybe it'll be terrible, but let's try. This could be the worst idea in the world, but what if we, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And forgive me for not, but I haven't taken one of your classes.
That's okay.
And I am curious, how does it vary for you? Are you using similar musics? Do you have favorite music to choreograph to?
Mm-hmm. You mean based on teaching to choreographing?
Yeah.
Teaching is a place where I get to just do whatever I want, which is
Okay.
so freeing and has helped so much. As I've worked on other projects, to be able to know that I can just do whatever I want in those rooms is really helpful.
Yeah.
But it's different. It's not collaborative. I come in with a plan. I have it. The steps are usually 9 times out of 10 choreographed already. And so I'm able to take people on a journey because I know where we're going. And it's only an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes. So I don't really have the time to play in those scenarios. But there are times that I've made things up in the room with dancers. But my opinion now is that if people are paying for a class, I want to be prepared for them. Right. So it is different. And it's more like I'm in more charge of their entire experience. I'm not relying on them as much to have ideas, as much as I'm relying on them to be present and respond.
Well, I imagine it makes you extremely flexible as a human in this industry, because you're wearing so many hats. You're going from non-negotiable, teaching this, to open and available for auditions versus open and available when you have your set cast.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, it's a similar thing about adapting to based on what the needs are of the project or the experience, right? That I have to constantly adapt, as I think performers do too. Every room you go into with every different choreographer, director, like really you have to kind of adapt. I guess the difference is that my role does change significantly. But I think there are people that are amazing at being in shows that are not amazing at taking dance class. They're two different skills, two different worlds, really.
Yeah.
I think my favorite performers to work with are the ones that can do both.
That's interesting too, to keep a sense of self. This is who I am in all of these situations, but yet still wearing a different hat.
Yes. And they're the performers that are really have a lot to say and a lot of ideas when you're working with them on a project. And then I love when dancers like that come into a class and can just listen and take the information that's given and then make decisions and go on the ride. I appreciate that a lot.
This is a broad question. I'm curious if we can get more specific on it. What do you enjoy most about movement?
The way it makes us feel.
Yeah.
The way it makes us feel. I mean, God, we're alive. It's such a weird
We're
thing.
moving.
We're
There's motion.
moving. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the way it makes us feel. And
Okay.
I think that's what people will love about dance. Both, I think people that become professional dancers, at some point you loved the way it made you feel. And in some ways, my job as a teacher is to remind you of that the source of why we do this is because of something that we felt for ourselves, that then we get to maybe share with other people. But if you don't feel it yourself, then I don't know how you can possibly bring joy to an audience if you don't find joy in it yourself.
And that it is joy.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be enjoyable.
Yes. I mean, part of I teach kids a lot, and one of the things I always tell them is, people want to pay you because they want to watch you enjoy yourself. Like, that's what they want to, a lot of people, a lot of audiences.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Audiences want to be challenged and they want to ask questions and all those things. But a lot of times, part of what we do in musicals especially is they want to watch a number that's at a party and watch everyone look beautiful and have a great time. And if you don't know how to have a great time on stage in front of other people, then I don't know that theater or commercial dance is really for you.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's part of what we have to know how to do.
Yeah. How are you keeping yourself in the light in this polarized world of darkness and light?
I'm incredibly blessed that I get to live in this bubble of dance and music.
Okay.
And I choose to engage in the difficulties of what go on in the world by reading the newspaper. And of course, it is all around us, obviously.
Yeah.
And I have friends that are affected by it more directly than I am. But I get to spend most of my time in these little rooms where I get to play great music and help people feel safe and good. So I have been really, really, really blessed to be able to do that and to give that to people. And I think at some point I was like, is this a good contribution? Like, is this what I should be doing right now? Like, I feel like there's more I can be doing, but I think it's important that we have those spaces. And so I feel happy that I'm able to give them to people. And while most people, at least politically in New York City, tend to have similar views, what's a better way to help understand someone that has a different view than you than to move with them? I think that ultimately is important as well.
Yeah. This is my own curiosity. Do you have favorite music you listen to?
Oh, yeah, it's endless. I mean, it's
a lot.
It's endless. It's all over. And
Or we
it's
could pick
constant,
a mood. I don't know.
It's a constant conversation. I mean, yeah,
Morning.
Morning, it depends. My partner, I'm in charge of the music in the morning, music and breakfast, and sometimes I ask him what he's in the mood for. Sometimes I just do it. I mean, it really does go all over the place.
Is this by your decision, or is this a radio station you're listening to that plays?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I'm a Spotify user.
Okay.
But I curate it very carefully, and I'm very aware of I never put things on the radio station.
Yeah.
I either
90s summer hits.
Yeah, although actually 90s playlists I can get on board with.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I it just depends. Yeah, it's really my hobby, which is ironic, and I feel like I should have a hobby that's not related to dance, but I do think that they're different because the music I listen to is not always the music that I want to dance to.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that too. I'm trying to because you're here in this bubble and you're doing so much of what you love, and it becomes only what you love, and then it's well, I feel like I should be doing something else. A downtime.
Yeah,
an unwind,
knitting or something, or playing sport, or I don't know. Yeah, that's how I feel. I'm I should be doing something that's not going to make me think about dance moves. But I'm still working on that.
Alas.
Reading is helpful, actually, for me.
Do you have any favorites?
Well, I have to say, since this is being recorded, and I feel like it's good advice, especially if you're a dancer, Agnes DeMille has a book called To a Young Dancer that I think all dancers should read. It is brilliant. And really actors, anybody. It's so quotable and it's so beautiful, and it's about being a performer and being in a studio and why we do it, and it's really good.
Was there anything in the book that stood out to you in terms of wow, it
was written, I don't know what year it was written, probably in the 60s. And it's still so relevant. I mean, it's all still so relevant, what she's talking about. And about what she talks about with audiences and why we do what we do and why it's important. And it just makes me feel like she understood the importance of dance and expression. And sometimes, in a world like this, sometimes I I question the importance of like what I'm doing every day. And it's nice to know that, you know, there's value in it. Not that I need Agnes to Mill to tell me that there's value in it. I see that there's value in it every day. But I don't know. There's something comforting about knowing that. Also, that things aren't that different now than they were then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they certainly had their problems in the 60s, let's be honest, and the 50s and the 40s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and beyond.
It's so true. Are there common pieces of incorrect advice that you've heard?
I think a trend that is very apparent to me that I think stems from, I don't know if it stems from advice, but it's about content and about how much content you put out there, right, into the world. And I think I wish that as much as social media is so important to a career, it's undeniable. And I participate in it, of course. But I don't know that it's about how much you're putting out there or how often you're putting it out there or how engaged you're keeping your quote unquote audience. You know, I wish that just more emphasis was put on real life interaction. And if you're going to put something out there, especially as a young choreographer, really take care of it and know what it is. And don't just make up stuff every week and show people. I don't think that that's the way to have an impactful career, personally. And I don't think that the number of people that watch your thing necessarily means that you have an impact.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, quality over quantity.
yeah, well, I
in a
think
way.
just using what we're doing as a tool. You know, I think part of the why we spend our life learning how to do something really well is so that we can use it as a tool to help affect change. And I just wonder if people are using their gifts that way or if they're using them because they just want people to tell them that they're good.
It's an interesting thing about that because you can almost always tell relatively quickly. Sometimes you're tricked, and you but in the end, you can always tell someone's motives, which is really, really helpful the more you can curate that professionally and, of course, personally. You save yourself a lot of negativity.
Yeah, but I think also
I think
the people that are drawn to that are people that want similar things.
Yeah.
I think that part of I've been lucky in that I've figured out the things that are important to me, and the more I really continue to act in that way and be motivated by what values I have, the more people that have similar interests and values are drawn to me, and I feel really supported and lifted up. And I also get to support other people who have just similar interests in what we're doing and what we care about.
You receive what you put out.
I think so.
Is there any, or do any come to mind, any mistakes made that have proved essential in learning?
It's hard to pinpoint, honestly, a mistake that I've made because I do feel like I don't have any regrets on any of the decisions that I've made along the way because I've really feel like I've acted from my guts. And there are certain projects, of course, that were very difficult, but I don't regret doing them because they help me understand what I need, what my needs are, and
what you don't need.
What I don't need, exactly. So nothing really stands out. It's a little cliche, but I believe it, and I feel so happy to be where I am right now and be having this conversation with you. It's hard to think about something that I wish I hadn't done.
Yeah. Okay. Upcoming projects.
Well,
what are you working on that you can talk about?
Yeah, sure. I'm doing So You Think You Can Dance. I'll be in LA for 3 weeks, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah. So where can I ask what city or what city?
It's LA.
Is it always LA?
Always LA, yeah.
I bet it's got to be amazing.
Yeah, it's so nice to go
sunny,
there.
The temperature's moderate.
Exactly. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And then I'm working on, I've realized lately that I'm interested in making some more small scale projects. So I'm working on some holiday projects. I'll say that I'm figuring out exactly what that means, but I'm really interested in creating festive celebrations that are centered around music and dance for people in the community to enjoy.
Love it.
That's what I'm working on.
Always creating.
Trying. Well, yeah, I like it.
You gotta. I know. It's so true. It's so true. Does a quote come to mind, or a story, or word, or a phrase, maybe for like a billboard for millions of people to see? Something that you've heard or that you love?
I had to give my cousin who's graduating college advice last year, and I thought about what I wanted share with him. And he's not a dancer or an artist. I shouldn't say he's not an artist, but he's not a performer.
Okay.
And the advice that I gave him was talk to as many strangers as possible, which I felt at that moment in his life was good advice. I think 9 times out of 10, when you talk to someone and you there's an opportunity to learn something. Sort of what we're doing here, right? I mean,
it's an opportunity to learn.
It's an opportunity to learn something. So I really feel so thankful of all the people in my life that I've gone up to and started a conversation with and made a connection with. And so I think it's important that we use our words and our presence and we talk to people.
I love it. This is great. Where can we find you on the socials?
So Instagram is Al Blackstone Choreo, and that's what I would follow. Yeah. And on my website is alblackstone.net. Yeah, but Instagram is usually the most current. Yeah, I've never been much into Twitter, and I don't understand Snapchat.
I don't either. But
we missed the boat on that one.
Maybe we're of a later generation there.
Maybe.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up here? Have we covered just about?
I think we've covered quite a lot.
We have.
And I thank you for the space to talk about what I think is important. So thank you.
I do, and I do hope someone listening listens.
I hope so
because
too.
it's nice in this setting to really share stuff that you can't go into an hour of dialogue over this in a class or an audition. You can't. But it's nice to, well, I think educate in this way.
Agreed.
So thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Al Blackstone.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.